Hello friend, welcome back. In this video, I want to discuss about how can edit your musician. So like I have already created some of the musicians, so that is all that musician is comes from our database table. So now if you click as a Kazarian, so now then it will be redirected to our album list with a specific one of the ID, right? And here it's showing our artist first name, the last name and the installment name. And also it's now showing this artist all that album. So first of all, I want to edit our artist name and the installment. So how can do that work? For doing this, first of all, I want to add one of the edit button on here. That means in our album list area. So now for doing this, you have to go to your project directory, and here there is our template and there is our fast tab, and then there is our album list, right? So into this album list area, I want to create one of the button. Like after this, okay, after this here I want to create one of the button. I just name it as a herif, and here better I want to define as a one of the button name will be as edit. So I just name it as edit, and for this button I want to define some of the class, then it will be better. So I just simply define another class, and here I want to use one of the bootstrap class as a btn primary. Okay, you can use that btn. They have also another class in bootstrap as a btn primary, btn warning, btn success, and also the delete. Okay, so right now I'm using that btn primary, and also I want to define that size. Like here, if you want to define some of the size, then you have to define as a btn sm rather than btn lg, that means the large, and also the md, that means a medium. So right now I want to use one of the small size, so I just simply define as a SM. Okay, that means the small. So now if you click as a save all, and now if you refresh it, I just refresh. Now you can see they have also one of the button is added as edit. So now I want to do, if you click as a edit, then it should be redirected to our another HTML page, and where I want to load our this form for edit. Okay, so for doing this, I want to do in our template area, into the fast tab template here, I want to create new file. So I just simply create new file, and I just want to create one of the file as edit underscore artist .html. So now I just save it. So that is our edit artist.html. So first of all, here I want to define our extended details. Like that is our extended details, but I just simply copy it. So here we don't need to use that dog actually. So I just simply define as the extended fast tab and the base HTML, and also here I define that a block and the body block. So I think friend, you already know about it, so we have to also finish it. That is actually the end block. So I just simply copy, and after this here I define as the end block, and here I define better one of the h3 tag, and like it should be as edit our artist. Okay, I just name it as edit artist. And after that, what exactly we have to do? After that, we have to create one of the view function for this one, and also we have to create one of the path. So if you want to do that work, you have to go to your that is our application. So into the fast application, go to the views file. So right now there is model, so it's not important. Okay, that is edit will be important, the model, so we don't need this. I just simply remove it. So that is our view file. So previously I have already created one of the function as the index, the album list, and the musician form. That is our album form. And now I want to create another one. So now I want to create another as a function as a div, and I name that function as edit. Okay, edit underscore artist. And here also we have to pass that request. So I just simply pass that request, and after that it will be as a diction, that means our dictionary. So right now I want to make that dictionary as a empty first, and also we have to do same things. Actually we did that thing same, like here there is a render, right? Into this render here we have to pass our request, we have to pass that request, and then also we have to load our page. So here we have to load our page. So our page I have created, that is our template, that is our fast tab, and that is our edit as artist, right? So now I just name it as a fast tab. Into the fast tab I have created one of the page as edit underscore artist .html, right? And then I want to context it. So I just simply define as a context our diction. So that is our diction. Okay friends, so that is actually the pretty much same things we did before. So I have already discussed about that main core things. Okay, so now we will actually use it same things again. So here that is our function name. Our function name I have defined as a edit artist, and make that sure after that you have to use that column. Okay, so here I define that column. So now that is our function name, that is the edit artist. Here I define the request and the diction and the return render request, our fast tab edit HTML. So now we have to create also one of the URL. So for creating that URL, we have to go our application, and that is our URLs. So now I want to better copy it. Okay, I just simply copy it. I just simply paste it. So here I want to define that name. It should be as a edit artist. Okay, I name it as edit underscore artist, edit artist. And here also we have to define some of the ID. So I will do that things later. And also there is a views, and there is our function name. So in our views, I have created that function as edit artist. So I just simply define that edit artist, and I just name that our this path as edit artist. Okay friend. So now I want to define this link. I want to define this link in our album list, and that is our edit buttons that I have already added in our album list. And into the album list here, I have defined one of the button as a edit, right? So in particular that position I want to define our URL. So if you want to display that URL, I think you already know about it. You have to define your key as a URL, and then you have to define your app name. So I have already defined our app name in our URL. So that is our app name as a fast tab, right? So now with this fast tab, I want to display our route name. That means I have already created one of the paths. So here I have defined that path name as the edit artist. So now I just simply copy it, and now in particular that position I just simply paste it. So now what exactly it should be happen, like here right now if you click as a save all, I just click as a save all, check it, everything is well. And now I want to refresh our page. Now click as edit. Now you can see it's now perfectly redirected to our edit artist page. So in particular that position, what exactly we have to do? Here we have to actually get our specific ID data, right? Like they have the one of the ID, so that is actually the one ID data. And also if you choose any other things, like here if you choose that Michael Jackson, so that is actually the 2 ID data. So when you click as a edit, then it should be redirected to a specific this ID. That means here with this specific ID you have to edit it, right? So if you want to set up that things, first of all we have to load our all that form. So if you go to our form area, and into the form here you can see I have already defined one of the class as a musician form class, and into this musician form class I have already get all that our field. So now we have to first of all load this field. So now we have to defining it in our view. So into the view, that is our request, and after this I just take as a form. It's just like the same. So I just simply define as a form, and then with this form, okay, with this form I want to access our this form class. So that is our class name as a musician form, because I want to load all that our field. So for the reasons here I simply define our musician form class. Okay, that means here I define one of the object for this one, and then also we have to pass it in our dictionary. So here I just name it as edit. Okay, edit underscore form. I just name it as edit form, and I just define that things with the form. I just simply define that as a form. And also here I pass our dictionary in with this context into the dictionary in our edit artist.html page. So now we have to update our edit artist. That means here that is edit artist. So here we have to define one of the form. I think you already know about it. Into the form we don't need this class right now. Also we don't need this any action. So I just simply remove it. Here I have to define our method as a post. Okay, so I just simply define as a post method, and in particular that area we have to define our edit. That means from here I pass our edit form, right? That means this form. So I just simply copy it, and now here I just simply define our edit form. And also I want to display our all that edit form as paragraph. So for the reasons here I define as and then underscore paragraph. right friend? So I think you already know about it. And also that is actually our post form. So that means our method is a post, so we have to also define our CSRF, because from here we have to also update it. So for the reasons here I define our CSRF, because without this it will be not save the data. So I just simply define as a CSRF token. And after that I want to define another input field. So I just simply define as input field. Type will be as a submit type, and the name I just define as a submit, and then value I just simply define that value will be like as a update. Okay, so I just name that value, button name will be as a update. And for this button I want to define some of the class, and I just define that one of the button class as a btn info. Right now I'm using that info, and then btn is small, that sm. So now if you click as a save all, so I just click as a save all. So here I have defined our object. I have created one of the objects for our musician form, and into this musician form, from here I already get all that our data, that means all that our field data, right? So that's all the data actually comes from our models into this model. So that is all that our field data. So now I want to use it. So I want to use it. So now if you go here, refresh this page, click as edit, yeah, you can see it's now perfectly getting our all that musician field data as a first name, last name, and the installment in our edit artist page. But here you can see they have no ID. Because of all here, as I told you before, we have to get our specific all ID data. If you go to that our database, and into the database I have created one of the database. Now our database name is my first app, so that is actually my first app. And if you go to that musician, and into the musician, here you can see that is actually all that our ID. So now I want to get with a specific all that ID, and I want to get all that a specific ID name, the first name, last name, and the installment. So everything, it should be visible in our particular that area. So how can do that work? For doing this, first of all, where we have to do in our edit, that means when you click as the edit, then automatically it's redirected to with a specific one of the ID. So that is the things we already did that work. So now I want to define one of the ID in our album list page. So into the album list page, here I have defined that ID, right? So now I want to define one of the name as a artist ID. Okay, I just name it as artist underscore ID, and into this artist ID I want to get our which things. I want to get our this table, that means this table data into this table that have also one of the field as a ID. So I have already get all the data. I have already get all the data with this artist info, right? So with this artist info we access our first name. With this artist info we access our last name. So now I want to do with this artist info, I also want to get our this ID name. So for the reasons here I want to do with this artist info. So with this artist info I also want to access one of our database field name, as a ID. Okay friend, I hope you can well understand about it. So now we have to also define this ID in our URL. So now go to our URL. Into the URL here we have to defining it. So better I just simply copy it, because it should be edit this artist with a specific one of the ID. So I also define that ID name. So here I define that ID name as a artist ID. So I just simply copy it, and now here you can see there is also the same name as the artist ID. Also we have to define this artist ID in our view. So into the view, into the request. So previously I have already defined this type of work. You can see there is a request, and then we pass out the ID. So now I just simply define again into the request. Here I just simply pass this ID. So now if you click as a save all, I just click as a save all, check it, everything is okay. And now I just want to do everything step by step will be very much clear to you. Like here I'm using that Kaziarian one ID. So now if you click as edit, yes, now you can see it's now actually getting our one ID data. And also if you choose this one, so that is actually 2 ID. If you click as edit, now it's showing as edit artist 2. So now I want to get all that our 2 ID specific data and visible that things in our first name, the last name, and in our installment area. So for the 2 ID data, if you go to our database, for the 2 ID data, they have the first name as a Michael, the Jackson, and the Tobler, right? So now I want to get our specific 2 ID data and visible it in our this page. So for doing this, we have to work in our view. So I have into the view, I have already created one of the function as the edit artist. So into the edit artist, I want to get all that our data, right friend? So I think you can understand it. Like here, I take one of the variable as a artist info, artist underscore info. And in particular that position, I want to get all the data from where? I want to get all the data from our musician, right? That means the musician table. So that is actually our musician table. So I want to get all the data from this position. So I just simply define our musicians table. Into the musicians, I want to define our objects. I want to get all that objects, right, into the objects. And then if you want to get some of the specific data, then you have to define that get. And the primary key, I have defined our requested key. So our requested key, I have also defined that things as a ID. That means the artist ID, right? So here I have already defined one of the ID, so that will be our requested ID. So our requested ID means if you go to our site, and here you can see that is actually the specific requested ID. So with this specific requested ID data I want to load. So for the reasons here we have to pass that our primary key. Into our primary key will be our this requested ID, right friend? And also into the dictionary, I have already passed our this form, right? Into the form I have already created that object, and with this object I have passed our these things in our edit form area. That means our musician form, I pass it with this form. And also now I want to pass out all that requested data. That means a specific to ID data, which data I take the things with this variable. So now I want to pass it also in our this form. That means here. So here if you want to pass it, then you have to define as a instance. So I just simply define as instance, right? So I just simply define as instance, and then here I define our all the data, which data I get that things from our musician table and take the things with this variable. So now here I just simply pass it. So friend, I think it's very much clear to you. So from here I get all that our field. So here you can see that is all that field, and here also we pass a specific to ID data. And now I want to get a specific to ID all that data. So a specific this to ID all that data for the reasons in our form area. So that is actually our form. So into the form area, I get all that our data with a specific requested ID, and I just take this all data from our database table. That means the musicians table. I get it with this variable as an artist info. So now I just define as instant, and into the instant here I pass all that our data. So now it should be display all that our specific requested data in our this form area. Okay, and after that I also pass it in our edit form. So now let's check this out. So here I also define our diction, and then in our edit artist page, that means the edit artist HTML page. So now it should be visible. Like I show you, everything will be very much clear to you. I just click on the save all. Everything is perfect. So now you can see that is actually the to ID data. So now if you refresh it, yes, now you can see friend, I hope it should be very much clear to you right now. So a specific to ID data I have defined. So to ID data, our first name as a Michael, the Jackson, and the Tabla. You can see it's now showing as a Michael Jackson and the Tabla. If you go home, go to that Kazi Aryan, click as the edit, yeah, you can see it's now showing as a Kazi Aryan and the guitar. So there have the two function actually work. So for the reasons here, I have defined two of the things on here. So with this, I load our all that our field. So that is our all field as a first name field, last name field, and the installment field. And then I also define another condition. So here I get all the data from our requested ID. So our requested ID right now as a 1. Okay. So that is actually our one ID, all the data he will be get into the primary key area, and then I just simply pass all the data in our this form area with this instant, and I just simply pass it. So that is actually all that our data for the reasons you can see. It's now perfectly getting all the data in our first name area, last name area, and also in installment area. So now if you want to change that first name, if you want to change that last name, if you want to change that in installment, and then if you want to update it, then it should be updated. So how can update it in our next video? I will show you that things with a live example. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.